Upon entering the Great War, Enver Pasha launched a Caucasus campaign to reclaim losses from the Russo-Turkish War. The Ottoman defeat at Sarıkamış would be felt for the remainder of the war. Of nearly 100,000 troops, only about 18,000 returned. Frostbite, hunger and disease claimed most. With that, the Ottoman defences against Russian incursions weakened, heightening border tensions among Turks, Kurds and Armenians. The situation would only deteriorate despite the Ottomans' attacks and counterattacks in Persia, Mesopotamia and Egypt, which we will describe in this episode, alongside the Battle of Van. Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible. The Ottoman disasters at Sarıkamış and the worsening situation in the Armenian-populated eastern provinces of Anatolia had a significant impact on Persia, despite its initial neutrality under the 1907 Anglo-Russian Convention, which divided influence in the region. Belligerents were drawn in by its strategic location between British India, Russia, Afghanistan, and the Ottomans, and by its oil reserves. Persian forces were dispersed across Tiran, Kazvin, and Hamadan, with a British-Indian presence in the south, and a complex Caucasus theatre that included the Persian Cossack Brigade, elements of the Russian Caucasus Army under Armenian General Tevmas Nazarbekov, and Armenian volunteers, commanded by General Adranik Azanian. Meanwhile, Wilhelm Vasmus led a German eastward intelligence effort to mobilize Persian tribes against the Entente. During the Battle of Sarıkamış, Myślevsky diverted Russian forces in Persia to confront Enver Pasha's offensive, leaving only a single brigade, led by General Nazarbekov, and 1 Armenian volunteer battalion in Salmast and Urmia. Enver Pasha ordered the 1st and 5th Ottoman expeditionary forces to strike at Tabriz and Dagestan to dislodge the Russians from the Caspian shores, while a small Russian detachment crossed the frontier. The Van Gendarmerie Division pushed and pursued them back into Persian territory to keep the Kotor bridgehead open for Ottoman forces moving towards Tabriz. However, the Battle of Sarıkamış was straining the Persian front. Vasmus was arrested in March for organizing revolts against the Tangistani and Kashkai tribes, and handed over to the British. He escaped, but his capture allowed the British to get their hands on a German codebook that allowed them to decipher German communications, including helping decipher the Zimmermann telegram. On January 4th, a volunteer detachment led by Umar Naci Bey captured Urmia, and a Mosul-led force captured Tabriz, catching the Russians by surprise. In response, General Chernozubov engaged Ottoman forces in Sufyan, recapturing Tabriz by the 30th. On February 3rd, General Nazarbekov launched a counter-offensive, but the Van Gendarmerie Division held its lines. In early March, Nazarbekov renewed the assault with 7 battalions, prompting the Van Gendarmerie Division to evacuate Dilmun. In April, the 1st Expeditionary Force under Halil Bey advanced towards Dilmun to clear Nazarbekov's forces. However, Armenian messengers from Van reached Persia, and on the 14th, Armenian volunteers, led by General Andranik, repelled Halil Bey's attacks until Russian reinforcements arrived under Chernozubov. Russian Caucasus troops helped rout Halil Bey, whose Kurdish troops largely deserted him. 3 days of battle saw Halil Bey suffer 3,600 casualties, as Nazarbekov pushed his forces towards Bashkala, stabilizing the front and prompting Enver Pasha to order a retreat. But the aftermath of Sarıkamış was felt more strongly in eastern Anatolia. During the late 19th century, previously relatively peaceful Turkish-Armenian relations had deteriorated to the point of irreparable damage. The Armenians straddled both the Ottoman and Russian empires, fueling fears of a fifth column. In 1896, Sultan Abdul Hamid II provoked forced migrations and pogroms that killed or displaced hundreds of thousands of Armenians. After his abdication, the Young Turk era initially promised cooperation, but that expectation proved to be false. In 1914, as mobilization peaked, Russia reported that more than 50,000 Ottoman deserters, mostly Armenians, crossed into Russian lines. At Erzurum in October, the Young Turks proposed an alliance with the Armenian party, the Dashnaksuchen, in exchange for assistance against the Russians. They would be granted autonomy in eastern Anatolia and territories seized from Russian Armenia. The Armenians declined, insisting on loyalty to existing governments, while only 10% of them mobilized during conscription. This intensified Turkish suspicions of Armenian loyalty. Attempting to conceal his disastrous offensive at Sarıkamış, Enver Pasha used the Armenians as a scapegoat, blaming them for aiding the Russians, reinforcing the Committee of Union and Progress beliefs, and justifying a crackdown on Armenians as a fifth column. Beginning in November 1914, Bitlis, Van and Erzurum governors were pressed for harsher measures against the Armenians. By early 1915, Armenian civil servants were dismissed, and the CUP began disarming Armenian men and pressing them into labor battalions, often accompanied by raids and killings, with a large massacre near Bashkala. The CUP further pressed Armenians to support uprisings in Russian Armenia. The governor of Van, Cevdet Bey, brother-in-law to Enver Pasha, demanded 4,000 volunteers for uprisings, which the Armenians refused. In late March 1915, after a failed Khoi campaign, Cevdet Bey ordered reprisal killings of about 800 Armenians and Assyrians in the Salmas district. On April 15, 1915, Ottoman tax collectors clashed with Armenians in Erciş, the center for 80 Armenian villages. The clash escalated, drawing a Banat gendarmerie unit. By the 19th, over 2,500 people were killed in the area. On the 18th, Cevdet Bey ordered the Armenians of Van to disarm, and began covertly assassinating Armenian Revolutionary Federation leaders, including Nikogaios Pogos Michaelian, to intimidate them. Facing massacre or resistance, the Armenians fortified Van, forming a military defense authority and a women's union. The defenders numbered under 1,500 and had hundreds of rifles and limited ammunition, dividing Ikistan into 7 sectors with 79 positions. About 52,000 Ottoman troops were in the Caucasus, with 75% deployed north of Van. Gendarmerie units from Harput, Diyarbakır and Bitlis arrived in Van, which had its own gendarmerie and an artillery unit. The 36th Infantry Division moved from Mesopotamia to secure the area southeast of Lake Van. The 1st Expeditionary Force held south of the lake. On the 20th, Ottoman troops seized an Armenian woman attempting to enter Van, triggering Armenian counterattacks. Cevdet ordered a siege of the Armenian quarters. Fighting raged in the Kala district and Garden City. The Armenians used walls, gardens and blockhouses, fighting room to room, while Ottomans bombarded positions. Amid the siege, Aram Manukian formed a provisional Armenian government and sought aid from Russia. On the 28th, General Nikolai Yudenich ordered aid from Yerevan, including the 2nd Transbaikal Cossack Brigade and the Araratian Volunteer Brigade. Andranik Kazanian mobilized from Persia. By the 30th, refugees swelled Van to over 30,000. On May 6th, a Russian offensive towards Anatolia pushed back the Ottoman 1st Expeditionary Force and the Van Cavalry Brigade, as Armenian volunteers pressed towards Van. On the 12th, Arjish was taken, as Cevdet diverted artillery and 200 men to Bagiri. By the 17th, Cevdet abandoned Van, retreating towards Bashkala with the Ottoman 1st Expeditionary Force. Russian forces reached Van, and Andranik's troops arrived the following day. By May 20th, the city was under Russian occupation. Yudenich received the keys to Van, and Aram Manukian was recognized as governor of the Armenian Provisional Government. Ottoman losses were estimated at 2,000, while the Russians reported over 6,000 Armenians massacred at Van and more than 55,000 in the province. On the 27th of May 1915, the Ottoman government enacted a temporary law of deportation, authorizing mass relocation and, via secret oral orders, mass murder of deportees. Non-compliance risked dismissal or assassination. On July 31st, Russia ordered Armenians in Ottoman-held territories to retreat to Russia. Van's Armenians fled their homes, joining about 270,000 others towards the Yerevan plain. The massacre's principal architects, Talat Pasha, Dr. Mehmet Nazim, and Bahedin Shakir, sought to reduce Armenians to less than 5% of their population through massacres and death marches that primarily targeted men. Estimates of Armenian deaths range from 600,000 to 1.5 million. While suffering major setbacks in the Caucasus and Persia, the Ottomans still hoped for a decisive victory against Egypt. At the outbreak of World War I, seeking an end to British occupation, the Khedive of Egypt, Abbas II, aligned with the Ottomans. In response, on December 18, 1914, Britain deposed Abbas and re-established the Sultanate of Egypt under Hussein Kamel as a protectorate. Defending the Suez Canal was Britain's paramount objective, as it secured a vital line of communication to India, New Zealand and Australia. The Ottomans sought to sever this link to aid their allies, reclaim Egyptian territory, and entangle British forces in Egypt, thereby preventing a Dardanelles invasion. In mid-November 1914, Enver Pasha appointed Jamal Pasha as Commander-in-Chief of Syria and Palestine. In November and December 1914, the Ottomans mobilized the Fourth Army under Brigadier General Zeki Pasha at Damascus, with Colonel Kress von Kressenstein as Chief of Staff, coordinating the desert crossing and logistics. On November 21st, Jamal Pasha publicly pledged in Istanbul's central train station that he would conquer Egypt. The British, however, were not deeply alarmed, as Sinai offered few water sources, vegetation or roads, and they doubted Syria could muster enough forces to threaten Egypt. The Ottomans faced large bodies of water, defended by well-entrenched troops, armoured trains, and Entente warships. The force in Egypt, led by Major General Sir John Maxwell, totaled over 130,000 troops. Suez defences were organised into three sectors: Suez to the Bitter Lakes, Diviswa to El Fadan, and El Fadan to Port Said, with Entente warships augmenting these defences. The Ottomans had three possible routes to reach the canal: a coastal approach within range of warships, a central route through Beersheba and Ismailia, or a southern path between El Qasima and the canal. The central route was chosen to provide clearer tracks across the canal. Colonel Kressenstein commanded the Turkish 8th Corps, comprising 25,000 soldiers, with contingents from Sinai Bedouins, Druze, Kurds, Mohajirs, Circassians from Syria, and Arabs, supported by 9 field batteries and a 6.9-inch battery, concentrated in southern Palestine. His plan called for one division to seize Ismailia and cross the canal, reinforced by a second division and supported on the east bank by 2 more divisions, with an additional division reinforcing the west bank bridgehead. By January, the Ottoman Expeditionary Force assembled in Beersheba. On the 14th, Kressenstein's forces advanced in 3 echelons, harassed by Entente aircraft. The main Ottoman body moved along the central route, with smaller units on the northern and southern routes. On the 26th, British positions came under artillery fire as 6,000 Ottomans began an assault on Kantara, and the following day, the road between Kantara and El Arish was cut, as posts at Baluchistan and Kubri were attacked, prompting a British withdrawal to the canal's western shores. On February 1st, Kressenstein ordered a full assault, as the main body crossed near Ismailia, with diversionary attacks to the north and south, and batteries aimed at Entente warships near Lake Timsah. At 4:20, squads with pontoons and rafts attempted crossings, only to be repelled by the 62nd Punjabis and the 128th Pioneers at Sarıkamış posts. At dawn, the Tassim post was assaulted, as the Hardinge and Requin bombarded the attackers. About 350 Ottomans occupied the British day trenches east and south of Tassim post, but the 92nd Punjabis counterattacked and reclaimed the trenches by 15:30. The Ottomans launched diversionary attacks to the north, but were checked by batteries, rifle fire, and Entente warships. 600 Ottomans made it over the canal, only to be killed or captured. At 6:30, the 22nd Lucknow Brigade counterattacked the 73rd and 75th Turkish regiments, dislodging them from their positions south of Tassim post. 2 companies of the 2nd 10th Gurkhas, 6 platoons of the 2nd Queen Victoria's Own Rajput Light Infantry, and 2 platoons of the 92nd Punjabis advanced, but the 74th and 28th Turkish regiments counterattacked, halting them. They were reinforced with 6 platoons of the 2nd 10th Gurkhas, and, with fire from Entente warships, the Ottoman assault was brought to a standstill, about 1,200 yards from the British front line. Nearly all Ottoman pontoons were destroyed by Entente naval fire. South and east of the canal, Ottoman forces occupied entrenched positions 800 yards from the defences, bringing 2 field batteries into action against Entente ships. They duelled with Hardinge and Requin, as infantry assaults continued against Sarıkamış, Tassim and Ismailia. However, by 15:30, Ottoman infantry attacks had fallen apart. During a lull, the 11th Indian Division assumed control of the front between the Great Bitter Lake and Lake Timseh, while the 2nd Australian Brigade took Ismailia. The British concentration of troops prevented a crossing, and the Ottomans retired to their camp about 10 kilometers east of Ismailia that night. Jamal Bey judged that the Canal could not be overcome and ordered a retreat to Syria. Expecting a dawn attack, the British learned the bulk of the Ottoman forces had withdrawn. The British had suffered 162 deaths and 130 wounded. The Ottomans suffered 238 deaths, 381 wounded, and 716 prisoners taken. Suffering major defeats in the Caucasus and on the Suez Canal, the Ottomans were determined to recover Basra, which the British had captured the previous November. The British had already effectively achieved their Mesopotamian objectives by dislodging the Ottomans from the head of the Persian Gulf. Yet roughly 1,000 Ottoman troops under Supi Bey had entrenched at Qurna, threatening Shatt al-Arab. If Qurna fell, British control of the river junction would seal British dominance in the area. On December 3rd, a British Indian force comprising the 104th Wellesley's Rifles, the 110th Maratha Light Infantry, 2 companies from the Norfolk Regiment, and several gunboats attacked Qurna. Royal Navy gunboats on the Euphrates pressed the attack as troops crossed the Tigris, but the river could not be crossed into Qurna, and the attackers withdrew. On the 6th, reinforced by the remainder of the Norfolk Regiment, the 7th Rajputs, the 120th Infantry, and mountain guns, the British renewed the assault and pushed the Ottomans back from their positions, though a crossing into Qurna remained unreached. On the 8th, the 104th and 110th Infantry found a crossing point up the Tigris. They succeeded in cutting off the Ottoman retreat to the north, while gunboats continued to bombard the town. By the 9th, Supi Bey surrendered, with 42 Ottoman officers and 989 men taken prisoner. The British Indian forces suffered 37 deaths and 252 wounded. With Qurna secured, British forces established a firm southern Mesopotamian front, safeguarding the oil fields. The rapid British Indian advance in southern Mesopotamia had caught the Ottomans off guard. On January 2nd, Lieutenant Colonel Suleiman Askari Bey was appointed to command the Iraq area. With few Ottoman troops available, Suleiman turned to Arab sheikhs to bolster his ranks. He gathered a mixed force of about 18,000 and moved to attack the British camp at Shaiba, defended by roughly 7,000 under Major General Charles Melis. At dawn on the 12th, Ottoman bombardment and attempted infantry incursions through the breaches in the British barbed wire were repelled. The next day, the Ottomans fell back to Bajasiya Wood as their Arab irregulars tried to bypass Shaiba to strike Basra. Melis sent the 2nd Haryana and the 104th Wellesley's Rifles, but they were pushed back. He then ordered the 2nd Dorsets and 24th Punjabis, supported by artillery, forward. About 400 Arabs were captured, as the rest were routed. By 1700 on the 14th, a bayonet charge led by the Dorsets broke the Ottoman defence at Bajasiya Wood, forcing a retreat. Ottoman casualties were reported around 3,000 to 4,000, while British losses were about 1,200. Suleiman, facing defeat and mounting blame for the Arab irregulars' failure to support him, reportedly took his own life as the threat to Basra persisted. The Ottoman offensives in the Caucasus, Persia, Suez, and Mesopotamia stretched the empire's resources and exposed a string of costly failures. From the disaster at Sarıkamış to the aborted invasion of Egypt, stalemates were emerging in every major theatre. These campaigns revealed a troubling pattern of bold, yet poorly coordinated offensives, overextended supply lines, heavy casualties, and strategic blunders. Together, these drained resources and manpower, something the Entente were going to exploit as they planned for a bold campaign at Gallipoli. This and more are coming up in this series in the coming weeks, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.